2023 was the 100th anniversary of Weird Tales Pulp magazine, which began in 1923. So I found it fitting that we should end the year out with one more celebration of this incredible pulp magazine, which has inspired countless books, short stories, movies, comic books, you name it. Weird Tales, folks. This is Horror Anthology Movie Volume 1. I made this back in 2013. So it's 10 years old, folks, celebrating the 10th anniversary of Horror Anthology Movie Volume 1, which is renting beautifully. Many thanks to all of the people that continue to rent this film. There are 2 segments of the 6 segments in Horror Anthology Movie Volume 1 that are Lovecraftian cosmic horror in nature. One of them is mine. It is called Footage Found Araby, and it supposes this predicament that Lovecraft finds himself in. He goes missing while visiting in New Orleans in 1932. A lot of the film, a lot of the segment is shot period piece, as it is supposed to be in 1932 New Orleans. I think it turned out really well. And that is part of Horror Anthology Movie Volume 1. It is about 2 hours long, folks. There's no filler. There's no wraparound story with this. There's no horror host. It's all meat. Most of it is sci-fi horror for rent $2. Folks, it's $2 cheap. What happened with Adventures into the Unknown is that the first 11 issues were, the covers in the first place were done by an amazing artist called EDVARD MORITZ. One of the original Weird Tales writers, Frank Belknap Long, who happened to be one of H.P. Lovecraft's closest friends, wrote stories for Adventures into the Unknown. If you're lucky enough to have the original issue number 1 of Adventures into the Unknown, check it out. At least, I think 4 or 5 of the stories were written by Long. He is credited. He wrote what seems to be about a total of 20 stories for Adventures into the Unknown. So that makes this particular comic book, at least in the beginning, directly related to Weird Tales. It is definitely in the family tree. Adventures into the Unknown. If we scroll down, this is where you see the Frank Belknap Long connection, as they say here. The premiere issue, issue number 1, included a 7-page abridged adaptation of Horace Walpole's seminal Gothic novel, The Castle of Otranto, by Frank Belknap Long and Al Ulmer. And if we go to issue number 1, there it is, EDVARD MORITZ cover. And check this out. The first story is The Werewolf Stalks by Frank Belknap Long, with pencils and inks by Moritz. Fantastic. Next one, The Living Ghost by Frank Long. The Painted Grave. Now, there is a question mark. They're not quite sure if that one-pager was written by Long or not, and that's a text story. It Walked by Night, another one by Frank Long. The adaptation, The Castle of Otranto by Frank Long. It's the story from Horace Walpole. That is the fantastic Matt Fox cover for Chilling Tales, number 15. When you see Matt Fox's art, there is no mistaking it. The guy just has this weird, primitive kind of look. Matt Fox did covers for Weird Tales magazine in the 1940s. So from Weird Tales, he hopped on over to the comics biz, and especially with Youthful Comics and Chilling Tales, and did several covers. Astonishing number 11, early 1952, I want to say. And as you can see on the cover, The headline story is The Last of Mr. Mordo. The story itself is very much inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Absolutely, no doubt about it. This guy inherits an old house. Turns out that there's this weird group of cultists living beneath the house that have, through the years, mutated. At this time, of course, Stan Lee was the editor for Astonishing. Well, for Atlas. He was the Atlas editor. So he probably wrote this story. Joe Sinnott did the pencils and inks for The Last of Mr. Mordo. And he signed this copy. When I went to interview Joe Sinnott for my documentary Haunted Thrills, I brought this along, and he was gracious enough to sign the interior on the page where he did the first page of The Last of Mr. Mordo. Stan Lee grew up reading Weird Tales, probably even knew at least several of the writers that contributed a lot to Weird Tales pulp magazine. Journey into Mystery, the 1972 series. I'm just gonna go with issue number 1 here. Dig Me No Grave, adapted from the story by Robert E. Howard. The thing about Roy Thomas and Stan Lee is that they credited all of the writers, as you will see. They went to Arkham House to get permission to adapt Lovecraft stories. Issue number 4 is Haunter of the Dark, which is an H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. The Shadow from the Steeple, Robert Bloch. So as you can see, Journey into Mystery, they're doing legit adaptations of Weird Tales writers. It's Tower of Shadows, number 3. An adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Terrible Old Man, with art by Barry Windsor Smith, Stan Lee editor Roy Thomas, Barry Smith artist, by special arrangement with Arkham House. One of the original great Weird Tales writers, Robert E. Howard. Now, what I have in comic book form here, folks, Conan the Barbarian, we're going back into the 1970s, and the Roy Thomas, Barry Windsor Smith adaptation of Red Nails. Early to mid-70s, Marvel was really hitting everything right on the head, and they knew what they were doing as far as adaptations goes. But this is a fine adaptation. Now, Conan the Barbarian continues to this day, right? I mean, it has been popular pretty much since it appeared in the pages of Weird Tales circa 1930. What was the first comic book ever published that was entirely dedicated to H.P. Lovecraft? It's also in early 1970s, folks, to give you a hint. But it's not Marvel or DC. Oh no. Skull, number 4, the special Lovecraft issue. This is the first comic book ever devoted to H.P. Lovecraft. As you can see, the art there on the cover, it's a bit of a takeoff on the Hound. I've got to be a little careful with this because it's an underground comic, folks, which means there are naughty bits in it. Jay Sheridan, underground artist, that is just fantastic. There's a nice splash page, H.P. Lovecraft's The Hound. Beautiful use of zip tone. It is Pickman's model. Herb Arnold. A nice one-pager from the story. He's doing a takeoff on Goya, right? Saturn's child. Saturn's something. Highly recommended, folks. For the historical value, and a couple of the adaptations in here are really quite good. So it was the undergrounds that beat everybody else to the punch. Skull number 3, folks. Check out that freaking cover by Spain. This is early Richard Corben underground art horror comics. as it appears in Skull issue number 3. This is Skull number 5. Cover is by Spain. They were loving Lovecraft. Let's put it that way. They really dug the hell out of him. The Rats in the Walls. Adapted by Richard Corben for Skull number 5. The use of black and white and zip tone. Check those panels out at the bottom. Check out his use of zip tone. It is prime Corben underground and a great adaptation of Rats in the Walls.